Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 9 and today we are going to present about gender inequality, institution inequality, and then profession inequality. First, gender inequality. Gender inequality is a form of difference in treatment based on gender reasons, such as the limitation of rules, exclusion, or favoritism that results in a violation of the recognition of human rights, equality of rights between men and women. And then gender inequality exists when men or women enjoy disproportionately large share of some valued good, such as political power or long life. Men and women can differ in any numbers of domains, so gender intersects other types of inequality like educational, economic, political, and etc. The issue of gender inequality mostly surrounds women's fight for equality due to the historical dominance of men in society. Women today are still fighting for, first, equal pay for comparable work, and then quality education, and then entrance into male-dominated occupation, and the last, representation in government. And the next, there are 5 types of gender inequality. First, marginalization. Marginalization in the process of marginalizing women in all sectors of life, especially those relating to the management of living resources like economy and natural resources. For example of marginalization, there are nurse, laborers, domestic helpers, and confection workers who are rated as low workers so that it affects the level of salary or wages received. And then subordination. Subordination is an assessment or assumption that a role performed by one sex is lower than another. For example, there are members of legislative and executive bodies whose members are dominated by men because there is still a small number of women's representation in the world of politics. And third, stereotype. Stereotype is giving a label to a person or group based on a false or misguided assumption. Most of the stereotype is negative. For example of stereotype, that all women are considered like to be tempted, emotional, although in reality not all women have the same nature. And then violence. Violence is any act of abuse of physical force with or without the use of means against the law and poses a danger to the body, lives, and independence of people, including making people faint or helpless. For example, of violence are domestic violence, both physical and non-physical. And the last, double burden. Double burden is a workload received by one sex more than the other sex. For example, there is a woman who has to work to make a living while taking care of household needs.
And the next is professions inequality. Professions not as groups but as institutions whose conventions are ideologically shaped by such social relationships and realized through such particular discourses. The professionals' beliefs and assumptions of media workers are important and in keeping the power of media discourse hidden from the mass of the population. For example, it's against the law to directly employ a doctor except for under special circumstances. Here, hospital can employ the doctors, but usually hospitals have to be owned and operated in some part by other licensed physicians. Doctors in particular felt that being part of corporations was demeaning. They felt they needed to distinguish themselves from engineers and other skilled professionals who had become servants of large corporations, so they fought very aggressively to become employees or organize healthcare in a more efficient manner. Much the same is true for lawyers. They are allowed for work They are allowed to work for business if they are on staff as the legal counsel, but otherwise, you cannot unless you are a licensed lawyer open and operate an establishment that provides legal service even if the people providing the service are licensed lawyers.
The next is institution inequality. Institutional inequality is not the same as the more familiar concept of institutional discrimination. The latter term describes how structural conditions in workplaces facilitate decision-making driven by bias against protected groups. Scholars who draw on this concept often focus on how workplace structures can be changed to work against subtle or unconscious bias against historically disadvantaged groups. Scholarship in this vein investigates which workplace practice best alleviate persistent inequality at work, and it typically adopts an implicit model of individual animus or unconscious bias. This perspective pays little attention to the origins of these biases or the origins or workplace practices that facilitate their operation. It also typically doesn't consider how workplace structures actively construct the meaning of protected identities in ways that facilitate discrimination. Institutional inequality also differs from perspectives that view some workplace structures as gendered. These approaches argue that to eradicate inequality, laws must require that workplace structures accommodate the needs of women, for example, by providing time off for childbirth and recovery. Although these approaches are closer to the concept of institutional inequality than are theories of individual animus, these nevertheless tend to refine the meaning of gender and to promote objection that the laws will not require special treatment of some groups. These perspectives also typically do not consider how workplace structures subtly construct the meaning of gender in ways that reflect historical patterns of gender inequality long since rejected as illegitimate. In contrast, institutional inequality operates as a more societal and socially constructed level of analysis than this other perspective. Eliminating institutional inequality requires a historical analysis to identify not only the process through which work practice came to be taken for granted, but also how the meaning of those practices are deeply embedded in the social conditions that accompany their historical development. In this view, institutions are more important not because they provide mechanisms that accurate or limit the operation of unconscious bias, but because they embody particular, historically determined conception of identity such as gender. Workplace institutions are also important sites for leveraging social change because they effectively construct the meaning of gender identity. Changing these institutions may therefore change the social meaning of identities.
Criticisms of critical discourse analysis. Criticism of CDA comes from scholars in the area of conversation analysis and other fields of text analysis. Stieglitz argues that CDA is often short on detailed, systematic analysis of text or thought. For instance, as it is carried out in conversation analysis, he writes, you can see in the slide. The next is Julan in 1997 and 2002, and Stolps in 1997 also makes some criticism of CDA, arguing for a strengthening of the theorization of CDA. Julan in 1997 argues that some theoretical distinction in CDA, such as the difference between description and interpretative explanation, need to be further clarified. And the second, CDA needs to be more critical and more demanding of the text linguistics it uses. And the third, in doing CDA, true and strong evidence should be collected for the arguments made, while simple presentation of the analytical findings should be pursued. Criticism of CDA comes from conversation analysis, the reverse side of the debate between conversation analysis and CDA. Widdowson criticized the fact that the term discourse is as vague as it is fashionable. Discourse is something everybody is talking about, but without knowing with any certainty just what it is. In Fogu and Fegi, he also criticized the lack of a clear demarcation between text and discourse. Although there are criticisms of CDA, these do not distract from the value of work in the area of CDA. Many theories share strong political starting points for doing CDA, with their major focus on revealing hidden values, beliefs, and bias of text, and studying power relationship behind text.
Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.